why don't we begin by simply, I think some of you may know Robert from his work in NLP, but what you may not know is that I actually got to know Robert mainly through the kind of his business side. So about 20 years ago, he did a course called Success Factor Modeling, which I attended in London. And at that time, I was a very stressed businessman running my own sort of small business. Not really being able to work out where I was going, except trying to just sort of cope with the day to day. And I came on success factor modeling and found it kind of inspiring. Robert has, well, I don't know, it literally changed my life. I transformed the business. It grew quite dramatically. I took on a leadership team. I had some spare time. I started learning NLP, became an NLP trainer, and then Robert finally offered me a job about 10 years ago. So there we are. It's a sort of strange story. But I think that, Robert's contribution towards organizations, not just business, but any organization, it could be obviously health or government or NGOs or any kind of organizational work is phenomenal. You modeled consultants at A.T. Kearney, you modeled you modeled various entrepreneurs in success factor modeling and other sort of high performing people. And I don't know, I think you've made a huge contribution. To me, the Disney process is better than SWOT. It opens up creativity and it's used. I mean, I've trained people to do the Disney in like big chemical companies, they use it instead of SWOT. Disney themselves use your Disney process.
That's right.
So, you have an amazing background. So I sort of can keep blowing your horn, but tell us a little bit about yourself, apart from the NLP, which we know some of us might know about.
Well, yeah, first of all, thank you, Robbie. And it has been a really great journey together with you. And over many different, avenues. I can remember us meeting in Paris too, close to 20 years ago. And so we've had a nice, a long, and I think very fruitful journey together. So, and as you say, of course, I've been involved in NLP since it got started way back in early 1970s. From the business perspective, my first corporate client actually was Apple in 1980, and went in and did consulting work for various parts of that organization. I've also done joint projects with Apple and Lucasfilms. I've done a lot of, probably one of my longest corporate clients was the Fiat Group, not just Fiat Auto, but the Fiat Group, where I remember for a while I was working with 600 boards of directors, and coming in and doing a lot on leadership. My brother John and I co-owned a company with Fiat for a while that was all on consulting and leadership development. So for me, consulting of that kind, organizational and professional change has been as much a part of my background and my work as personal change. One of the other very interesting things is, as an example of something I did, was for Weight Watchers back in the late 90s, and they kind of redid their whole program based upon a comprehensive assessment I did for them. And we built a whole thing called the Tools for Living. So for me, consulting has definitely been a major part of my work. And I think that what we'll see as we go into generative consulting, it's a really good integration of personal change and professional change, or individual change and organizational change. And I think that's probably one of the major contributions that it brings. Often consulting is about looking at spreadsheets and perk charts, or Excel charts or something like that, whereas we're really looking at not only the structure of the organization, but how people are part of that. One of my main mentors, in fact, and was a big part of my journey in consulting, was an Italian man named Gino Bonassoni, who was a strategy consultant for big Italian companies. And remember, one of the things we were talking about, how do you change organizations? And he said, well, you don't change organizations, you change people. It's people that make organizations. So if you're talking about any kind of organizational change, it's people change. So, and I think that's kind of, one of the things we emphasize in the generative consulting. So I don't know, that's a bit of that. There's much more to say, but there's a bit of that background. I don't know if you have any other questions.
Hand over to you, Robert, the main attraction.
Main attraction. Thank you, Robbie. So yeah, so as Robbie was saying, what I thought I would do just to kind of is lay out the basics of what generative consulting is about and what we'll be doing in the program, the 3 days. And then we have time for questions, and because I think that's often the most interesting part for all of us, certainly for me. I'm going to now go to my screen for just a moment, and we have this idea of generative consulting. And so there's first important thing to say is that this was something was collectively developed by myself and my SuccessFactors modeling leadership team members. So Elizabeth Falcone, Mickey Faher, Colette Normandou, Jean-François Thierry, and Catherine Wyss, and who are all also NLP trainers and also consultants themselves. And we wanted to basically come up with a record, a way of sharing what we do as consultants. And so there is a book out about this, titled Generative Consulting, the subtitle, which I think says something too about what the process and the program is about. Tools for consciousness, creativity, and collective transformation. So consciousness, creativity, and collective transformation. And I think those are three really important aspects of what generative consulting is. Its roots are in success factor modeling. Robbie mentioned that before. Success factor modeling is a process that I developed with my late brother, John. And it has three basic areas, and there's 3 volumes here, as you see. One is on what we call next generation entrepreneurs, which is about living your dreams and making a better world through your business. So that's what we call next generation entrepreneurs. There's also a big part of the success factor modeling work was around what we call generative collaboration, which is about releasing the creative power of collective intelligence. And then a third area is conscious leadership and resilience, which is about orchestrating innovation and fitness for the future. So this is sort of the background, and as we'll see, these play an important role in the generative consulting process, because they're all about how do we bring change into an organization? How do we take individuals and organizations to a next level of performance? So that's kind of the background. And then the generative consulting, as we say, is a book that is about how we use those different aspects of organizational change in consulting work. The basic components of success factor modeling. So what do we model when we're doing success factor modeling? Well, the key to it is mindset. Again, as I said, a lot of times when you look at consultants or what consultants do, they're going to come out with some kind of, spreadsheets or whatever, kind of starting with, these kind of technical aspects of change. We start with mindset because, we say that the way that people think produces their actions. And those actions are what create the ultimate outcomes that we're looking for. And so success factor modeling tends to focus on, 5 categories of outcomes, we could say, 5 areas of outcomes. One is, personal satisfaction in what we're doing. That's extremely important. Satisfaction of team members, satisfaction of customers. Second is contribution, making a positive difference. I think all of us, we know that ourselves and our professional lives. We want to somehow contribute to make a difference for others, regardless of what industry we're in. Innovation is key, and of course, that's ever more important in today's world. And then, of course, profitability, that's one of the often a main goals, to have some kind of financial stability, financial, robustness, and then growth, to grow, to scale. So these are the kinds of areas that are typically the types of goals that organizations are going to be looking at. And as we say then, either to achieve those goals, there have to be actions taken, but to take those actions, it starts with mindset. So now in the generative consulting work, there is an overlap with coaching, so that a lot of the work that I do also in business involves coaching, sometimes coaching a top manager, coaching different people who are in the company or teams. And so what is the connection between, coaching and consulting? So many of us who've learned NLP, are very familiar with the whole notion of coaching, where you're working with an individual, you're focusing on personal development. A lot of it's about questioning. Consulting is kind of a complement to that. It's about organizational development. So it's, rather than focusing on the individuals, focusing on the organization, and typically involves not only asking questions, but also giving advice, so advising. And so this is a big part of generative consulting, is an integration in some ways of coaching and consulting, because as it says there, the sort of ultimate connection between these is some kind of empowerment. Now, along with this then, in generative consulting and in success factor modeling, we see that when we look at an organization, we see what you could say is a hold-on. And hold-on is a term that was made up some years ago, that essentially means that everything in the world is a hold-on, meaning that it is a whole in and of itself, but it is made up of other wholes and part of bigger wholes. And even an atom is a hold-on. It's made up of other things. It's part of bigger things. A human, clearly, as this image from one of my books is showing, human is made up of different parts. We've got, a brain, a heart, a belly. Those are made up of cells or tissues. The tissues are made of cells. The cells are made of molecules, etc. But we're also part of successively bigger wholes, part of a family system, a professional community, a culture, a planet, ultimately. And when we look at something from the generative consulting perspective, we're always perceiving it as a hold-on. And one of the biggest challenges in working with people and organizations is that we often don't see the hold-on, and the holarchy. The holarchy means all of the different levels. And what we're always trying to keep in mind in generative consulting is that when you're working with one part of a hold-on, you're impacting the others as well. We see this happening today in many businesses, where on the one hand, you might have a successful business, but the people are burning out, and maybe it's doing something damaging to the environment. So we're really wanting to have this NLP talks about a principle of ecology, and that comes from this perspective of hold-on. So now, what do we mean by generative? So generative consulting is not just any kind of consulting. Generativity generally means to create something. When you're generative, you're creative in a particular way, usually meaning that you've got to create a result that has not existed before, or sometimes you have to get the same result, but doing it in a completely different way than has ever been done before. So change brings about both of the need for both of these. So, we are working with our clients as generative consultants to help create something new and evolutionary. And we have this, Einstein is considered a genius. He did things generatively, and we see that picture there shows that it's not, to be creative, you've got to have more than just knowledge. It's, as he says, it's intelligence having fun. So in some ways, that's also a big part of what we're doing with generative consulting. In fact, a major foundation of generative consulting is the use of multiple intelligences in order to, gather information